Saru there doing his part for Navarre Federation relations. You know what I mean. Hi, I'm Phil, welcome to my channel where I like to talk about all the geeky pop culture that I like and consume. Things like Doctor Who, Red Dwarf, and Star Trek, which is what we're talking about today. We are talking about the brand new episode that just came out of Star Trek Discovery, the 4th episode in the season. And there are going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, maybe go away, watch it. If you are in the UK, it's on Pluto TV at 9 PM online. That's where you can watch it, on Friday, Saturday, and I believe Sunday. You have to watch it in linear time. It's annoying. Or you can buy it on Apple. Apple? Yeah, I think you can buy it on Apple, not Music, Apple TV. But if you have watched it, let's talk about it, because this episode, I think, is the one I've been waiting for. If you've been watching my reviews of the last 3 episodes, I haven't been particularly enamoured with this season so far. I don't know what it is. I haven't thought it's particularly bad. There's not been anything that I've gone, oh my god, this is the worst thing ever. It's not quite that bad, but it just hasn't gripped me. None of the storylines, apart from Booker's storyline of his grief and dealing with his grief and losing his family, found that really fascinating and interesting. But the rest of the plot lines that have come up this season, I've not been particularly invested in. And I was starting to worry that the whole season would be a bit like that. Thankfully, this episode, actually, every single plot line in this episode, I really enjoyed watching for one reason or another. Different reasons to different levels, even. But there wasn't a plot line in this where I was bored, like I have been the last few episodes, where I just didn't care, frankly. Like, up until this episode, I had not cared about Tilly's ongoing plotline. I don't know why. There was just nothing about it that particularly gripped me. But this episode made me care about that plotline, which for the last 3 episodes I haven't cared about. This episode got me invested in it. And it right at the end of that particular arc, I presume. But at least I am now, and it was a really good episode for Tilly, and I really enjoyed that. I think a large part of this was the focus on the previous episodes where they've been focusing on the anomalies, because the anomaly plotline still just doesn't grip me. But it wasn't really a part of this episode, so hence why I didn't have that hanging over it, thinking, they're just doing the same thing again. There was a lot of really good stuff in this. The Tilly plotline I really liked. The politics with Navarre rejoining the Federation, that was really good. And I'd expressed some concerns about the speed things were. They were reforming the Federation to the level it was before already in this review series. So the fact that they got me on board by the end of this episode and Navarre rejoining so soon is a testament to this as well. It's overall just a really solid episode, and the first episode where I've been able to really say that about this season, so I'm really glad that we've gotten this episode. As well as the 2 sort of main plots that are going on, we've got things ticking over in the background. Culber being a really good counsellor. It's quite nice having him there as a counsellor figure, sort of the Diana Troy, as well as his medical role. And we get several scenes here of him doing counselling sessions, one with Tilly at the beginning and a few with Booker later on. And I really enjoyed those scenes. The dynamic between him and Booker, the kind of his own, Culber's own way of doing therapy was interesting. And he said at one point that, I'm not meant to, all training suggests I'm not meant to bring in my own personal stories, but I'm going to. So he's got his own unique spin on it. And I really liked those scenes, especially the ones with Booker, because that again delves into the plot line that I've been most invested in this season already. His grief, the fact that he hasn't just gotten over it with that mind meld last episode, and that it's pointing out that grief isn't doing one thing. Getting over grief it's not just doing one thing and you're over it. It's a process, and it's an ongoing process, and one that will always be with you in some way or another. And there'll be moments where you do something that makes it better, and moments when the next day it's gotten a bit worse again. And to see that acknowledged in the show, I think is a really positive thing. You've got Adira and Gray, and Adira has their own sort of hang-ups that they've got dealing with their own things, they don't go to Culber about it in this episode, sort of their father figure in a way, as maybe that's why, maybe there's a sort of awkwardness there, as you would have talking to your own parents about it, as he's taken on a kind of father figure role to Adira. But Adira, in their conversation with Gray, it's very evident that they are very different people when it comes to how they socialize and how they make friends. Gray is very outgoing. He's talking about just walking into a games session where he doesn't know anybody and will just will just go and talk to people. And Adira says that they can't possibly comprehend doing that. They are reserved, shy, don't know how to talk to people they don't know. And it sort of shows the difference between these two characters and how they complement each other. But also, that's the journey that Adira is going to go on throughout the episode when they get invited onto the to join Tilly doing this cadet training thing, the team building thing, because Culber thinks it will benefit Adira massively, as well as benefiting Tilly. I really liked this whole plot line, and yes, it is one that we've kind of seen before, this whole typical situation of, yeah, it's a seasoned veteran with a group of cadets and they crash and they have differences and there's arguing. It's all of that kind of, we've seen that several times throughout Star Trek. Every one of the shows has that episode in some way. And in many ways, this didn't do anything new, but it still served a great purpose, particularly for Tilly's character. Also for Adira's, but maybe less so for them. But predominantly for predominantly for Tilly's character even. Because her plotline seems to have been that she doesn't know what she wants to do with herself. She was on this track to become a captain. She wanted to do the officer program, and she had a mindset on becoming captain one day. And we saw her grow in her confidence and her leadership in that time, and that she's been on there. But since becoming a lieutenant, she's been feeling a bit more weary about, is this the right course for me? And like I said, I hadn't been invested in that until this episode, because as I said, things go wrong. They crash on a planet or a moon they're not meant to, and there's creatures attacking the ship, so they have to abandon the ship and hike to where they might be able to get a signal for a rescue. Oh, and a character, one of the cadets, dies in the crash as well, so that's Tilly having to deal with 2 deaths already this season, sort of right in front of her, because in that first episode, was it, where the anomaly had disrupted the ship, the guy the commander of the base that they were helping rescue people from, he died in the end, and she'd had this, throughout the episode, had this interaction with him. So that's the second time that Tilly's had to deal with this. At one point, one of the cadets, after they crash, asks if this is all part of the exercise. Are they actually just in a hologram thing? And I've got to say, that was something that crossed my mind. Because, again, it's something that Star Trek has done before, where, it was all a training exercise. It wasn't real. This person really didn't die. And I'm really glad they didn't do that this time. I think it would have cheapened it quite a lot. And would have been really harsh on the cadets as well. So I'm glad they didn't do it this time. And it was a real situation. It kept the stakes real, and that felt right. And this plot kind of, again, takes the course that these type of plots usually do. They're struggling to survive. They have disagreements and arguments about what course of action they should take. There are prejudices between the groups. So there's an Orion on there, and then there's another species that I can't remember the name of, who were one of the species that have been subjugated by the Emerald Chain, which was obviously run by an Orion after the burn. So he has some prejudice against the Orion. The human that's on board has never met a non-human before, so she's a little bit wary of the other two as well. So there's all this prejudice bubbling under the surface, as well as them disagreeing on what sort of action they should take, because they're very different people. And Tilly's trying to get them to bond. Before the accident, she was trying to get them to bond, and now it's a matter of survival. She needs to get them to work together, and eventually she does. And I think Tilly showed great leadership here in this scene. The way she gets them to open up about their own history. So yes, the the other guy that I can't remember the species of, his family were subjected to horrible things under the Emerald Chain, but so was the Orion guy. It's delving into breaking apart that idea of the monoculture that Star Trek had, previously been guilty of building up, that all races are the same. One thing I like about this era, and they do this in Lower Decks as well with Tendi, is that they make a point of, and with the Ferengi in Lower Decks as well, that they don't, that these aren't monocultures. There are different people in here. So the Orion that's on this mission was, his father was sort of a rebellion, led a rebellion against a political dissident against the Emerald Chain, standing up for slaves' rights and things like that, and was a political prisoner because of that, and died in prison. So they build this this kind of camaraderie from finding out this stuff about each other, and eventually make it through and get to the point where they need to signal up to the ship. But these creatures are tracking their technology, so every time they use their technology, they're at risk of being eaten by these things. So Tilly, again, showing great leadership, basically distracts it, runs off in the other direction with firing her phasers, and distracts it so the others can send the signal and be rescued. The others also join in, sort of like when they see that the thing is about to get Tilly, they fire their phasers to try and distract it away from Tilly. So they've learned a lesson about working together as well. And it's all a very, very Star Trek plot line. And like I say, it's one that's been done before, but it serves Tilly really well. And to a lesser degree, it serves Adira as well, because Adira has again been struggling about how they make friends, about how they interact with people, about their place on the ship. And this kind of gives them, they make some friends with amongst the other cadets, and I think it gives them a better sense of who they are. And at the end of it, Tilly is offered a position at Starfleet Academy teaching, and that kind of solves her dilemma about not knowing where she feels she belongs, because she realizes that actually teaching, throughout this whole experience, has realized that teaching is something that she really enjoyed and thinks she can impart some knowledge on future cadets. So at the end of the episode, she departs Discovery. Now, I don't know. I don't know if there were any announcements about what's happening with the actress. Is she leaving the show? I don't know. I suspect we might see her, maybe not every episode from now on, maybe periodically for at least the rest of this season, when they go back to sort of the Starfleet base. It's a shame to lose one of the OG characters, one of the OG main characters, but I think it's a natural place for her character to go, and I quite liked how it ended up. All the politics stuff in Navarre was really good as well, because Navarre's on the precipice of rejoining the Federation, which I've expressed my concern that they're moving a bit too fast in this. And in fact, at one point, the president of Navarre indeed says, perhaps we have moved too quickly in these talks. And there was me thinking, yes, perhaps you have. We're only 4 episodes in to this season, and the rebuilding of the Federation. Let's slow it down a bit. Let's space this out. But by the end of the episode, because what happens, as you'll know because you watched it, with the whole there being one final thing in negotiations that Navarre wants, and that is basically a clause that says they can leave the Federation without any penalty, without anything, whenever they want. Just click their fingers and leave. And that's because they've been burnt by the burn. But burnt before that as well, with how they felt the Federation was handling things. And so you've got this whole political game of politics stuff that's going on, which was really interesting, and another side of Star Trek that I really like, where the president of the Federation can't make the Federation look weak, because if they agree to this, then other worlds will want it, and ultimately you'll get a weaker Federation because of it. But equally, the Navarre president can't back down on it, because politics on her planet are quite, awkward as well. You got the Romulans, the Vulcans, all kind of on this planet that have come together as now one civilization, but there's still a lot of tensions there and a lot of disagreements and different factions. And so it's both of them, both presidents want Navarre to join the Federation again. But it's the political game of creating the situation where they're going to be able to sell it to their people. And for that purpose, I like the way that initially we think that, or it's painted that the president is kind of like, again, the adversary. And I was concerned about this as well, that she was the adversary for the internal adversary for Burnham for the season. But actually, what I do like is that they're doing it slightly differently, because they're not trying to lead us down a path of thinking she's bad only to reveal she's good at the end. Kind of like what they did with the Admiral last season, where we didn't really know, is he corrupt or whatever. No, we didn't know until quite late on. But here, it's just that they like to do things differently, but also sometimes they have the same goals. And while the politician might do things that Burnham would do differently as a Starfleet officer, they do have the same goals in mind. They want Navarre to rejoin. So it's sort of said that Burnham and Saru realised that both of the presidents wanted them there so that they could facilitate some kind of compromise without either of them looking weak. So, and they managed to do this, which is really good. And what they come up with is a kind of oversight committee that's separate from Federation politics. And Burnham's going to sit on it as a kind of that one person that is kind of has a foot in all grounds, because she's a Navarran citizen from being, brought up on Vulcan. She's a Federation citizen. She's a Starfleet officer. She kind of sits in all camps. So they agree that she can be on that council. I don't know who else is going to be on it, but she can be on it. And as a kind of oversight to this, that will not just for Navarre, but for all worlds, and we'll check in on how the Federation is interacting with its member worlds, and is it serving them properly. And I really like that kind of feels very Star Trek, that kind of solution to the situation. So yeah, this was the first episode this season where I've come away from it feeling really positive, and I've liked what I've seen. I do think that's a large part because it wasn't dealing with the anomaly, which, there was a brief reference to it as being the reason why Navarre's being even more cautious. But it barely, other than that, it barely was even mentioned in the episode, which I'm really glad about, because, as I said, I'm willing to see where it goes, but so far, the anomaly story isn't gripping me. But I loved this episode. It's a really good episode. Looking forward to now seeing what they do next week. And some of these plot lines now I'm a bit more invested in. I mean, the Tilly one, I guess, is kind of ended, unless we're also going to see her follow her story as she sets up as a teacher in the academy, which we may well do. Like I said, I don't know if she's leaving the show or not. Do let me know in the comments below if there's been any announcements about that. But yeah, good episode. What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments below, and we can talk about it. In the meantime, I'll see you next week for another review. See you then.